All right, so let's dive into something I think we all think about. Maybe not enough, though, emergency savings.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically, how are Americans doing with their rainy day funds here in 2025?
Right.
Well, we've got some fresh data from Bankrate's annual report, and
Hi.
they've been polling over 1,000 U.S. adults on this every single year since 2011.
Wow.
So that means we can spot some pretty interesting trends.
Yeah.
But you know what really caught my eye is that for the first time ever,
Heck.
more Americans are saying their savings have actually increased rather than decreased,
Oh, yeah.
which is a pretty big deal considering all the economic uncertainty lately.
Yeah, for sure.
So the big question is, are we on the road to recovery, or are things still a bit shaky?
Mm.
Let's find out.
Yeah, let's dig in.
So,
What I think is so fascinating here is that this positive trend is emerging despite all the challenges, of recent years.
Yeah.
We've had inflation, we've had interest rate hikes, you name it. We've been through it.
it's been a lot.
And yet 30% of Americans have more stashed away for emergencies
Okay.
now than they did a year ago.
Wow.
And that's compared to just 27% who've had to dip into their savings.
Okay, so that 3% difference might not seem huge at first glance,
Right.
but it is a pretty significant shift from the pattern we've been seeing.
Yeah.
For the past few years, more people were draining their savings, not adding to them.
For sure.
And Bankrate's chief financial analyst, Greg McBride, he put it this way.
Okay.
He said, as the pace of inflation has slowed, it has enabled more Americans to make progress in building or rebuilding their emergency savings.
I see.
Makes sense, right? If your daily expenses aren't skyrocketing, you've got a bit more wiggle room to squirrel some money away.
Yeah, absolutely.
But is this a sign that Americans are feeling more financially secure overall?
Well, it's tempting to think so, but the data reveals a counterpoint.
Oh,
This is where I think the debt dilemma comes into play.
okay.
You see, despite this uptick in savings, a substantial number of Americans are carrying more credit card debt than they have in emergency savings.
That's kind of a gut punch, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Like you're trying to be responsible, build that safety net, but then you look at that credit card statement and
Right.
it's hard to feel like you're making any progress.
That's exactly what you mean.
So how many people are we talking about here?
Well, we're looking at about 33% of Americans who find themselves in this predicament.
Okay.
Now, that's actually an improvement from the 36% we saw in both 2023 and 2024,
Oh, good.
but still significantly higher than the 22% reported back in 2022.
Wow.
So this tells us a few things.
Right.
First, that the economic turmoil of recent years has had a lasting impact.
Yeah.
And second, there's a clear connection between this rise in credit card debt and the depletion of emergency savings.
Right.
You can almost imagine people being forced to choose between, putting food on the table or paying off their credit card bill.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. And if we look at the generational breakdown, it's millennials and Gen Xers who are kind of shouldering the heaviest burden here.
Interesting.
Millennials, those between 29 and 44, they lead the pack at 42%,
Okay.
followed by Gen Xers at 39%.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners here?
Yeah. Should they be focusing on saving or tackling that debt first?
Yeah, it feels like a real catch-22.
Yeah.
It's a juggling act for sure.
Right.
There's no easy answer.
Yeah.
The report shows that 35% of Americans are trying to do both simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
They're saving and paying down debt at the same time.
Okay.
Another 28% are prioritizing savings,
Okay.
while 24% are focusing on debt repayment first.
I see.
Greg McBride, I think, really hit the nail on the head when he said, with more than 1/3 of Americans prioritizing both emergency savings and credit card debt, it underscores how many households are in the position of having both high-cost credit card debt and being undersaved for emergencies.
Okay, so that quote really highlights a crucial point.
Yeah.
For those unfamiliar, high-cost credit card debt simply means that the interest rates on your credit cards are eating away at any progress you might be making with your savings.
Right.
It's like trying to run up a down escalator. You
Yeah.
might be moving, but it's incredibly difficult to gain any ground.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
so we've seen this, tension between wanting to build savings and wrestling with that existing debt.
Yeah.
It's a tricky situation, but, I'm curious what happens when life kind of throws those curveballs our way, those unexpected expenses you just didn't see coming.
Right.
The report actually imagines a $1,000 emergency,
Okay.
something like a car repair or, unexpected medical bill.
Mm.
What do people do when that happens?
That's where things get really interesting. The report found that only 41% of Americans said they could handle that $1,000 hit using just their savings.
Oh, wow.
And that's actually down from 44% in 2024. So even though we're seeing, a slight uptick in overall savings,
Yeah,
fewer people are actually feeling confident they could cover a surprise expense
I see.
solely with what they've saved.
So if not savings, what are the alternatives?
Right.
I'm guessing they aren't ideal?
Unfortunately, you're right. The most common backup plan seems to be turning to credit cards.
Oh, no.
25% of Americans said they would put that $1,000 on plastic,
Wow.
which is up from 21% last year.
Okay.
And that's where that high-interest debt cycle we talked about earlier can really start to snowball,
Yeah.
especially with interest rates as high as they are right now.
It's a slippery slope for sure.
Yeah.
Are there any other options that people mentioned?
Well, the report highlights a few, but,
Yeah.
they each come with some potential downsides.
Okay.
13% said they'd reduce their spending elsewhere,
Okay.
which, could mean delaying some necessary purchases or cutting back in ways that really impact their quality of life.
Right.
Another 13% said they would borrow from family or friends, which, can strain relationships.
Yeah, definitely.
And 5% would take out a personal loan,
I see.
which, while sometimes necessary, they often carry some pretty hefty interest rates, too.
Right. Yeah. It's a real reminder of how crucial that financial cushion is.
Exactly.
That emergency fund to help you kind of navigate those unexpected bumps in life.
For sure.
It makes you realize how vulnerable you can feel without that safety net.
Absolutely.
It's no wonder that the report found that 73% of Americans say they're saving less for emergencies
Wow.
because of things like inflation, those high interest rates or changes in their jobs or income.
Yeah.
That's a huge chunk of the population directly affected by all this economic turbulence we've been experiencing.
It really highlights how these broader economic forces trickle down and impact people at a personal level.
Yeah.
It's not just about, abstract numbers.
Right.
It's about real people making tough choices,
Yeah.
in their daily lives.
Yeah, and it's not just the actual costs.
Right.
It's the anxiety that comes with it.
Yeah.
The report found that 69% of Americans would be worried about covering their living expenses if they lost their primary source of income to zero.
Oh, gosh, that's a heavy weight to carry.
Right, that fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
If you're already struggling to make ends meet, the thought of losing your job must be incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
I'd imagine that's especially true for younger generations who haven't really had as much time to build up their savings.
You're spot on when we break down that anxiety by generation, Gen Z,
Okay.
those between 18 and 28.
Okay.
They're the most worried at 80%,
Wow.
followed closely by millennials and Gen Xers, both at 72%.
Okay.
It speaks to the need for, that safety net, that sense of financial preparedness
Right.
to kind of alleviate some of that anxiety.
That safety net, that peace of mind is really what an emergency fund is all about, right?
Absolutely.
Experts generally recommend having enough to cover 3 to 6 months of expenses.
Right.
But the reality is not everyone is there yet.
Of course not. And this is where the report delivers another sobering statistic. Okay. 27% of U.S. adults have no emergency savings at all.
Wow.
That's the highest percentage since Bankrate started tracking this back in 2020.
So over a quarter of adults are living without that financial cushion.
Exactly.
I'm guessing there's a generational divide there too.
There is. Millennials lead this statistic, unfortunately, with 34% having no emergency savings.
Wow.
Followed by Gen Xers at 31%, Gen Zers at 29%, and then Baby Boomers at 16%.
Okay, so we've got this picture of where things stand.
Yeah.
It's a mix of some, hopeful signs that uptick in savings,
Right.
but also some persistent challenges with debt and a sizable portion of the population without any emergency savings at all.
Yeah.
It can feel a bit overwhelming, honestly.
It can.
What's the key takeaway here for our listener?
Right.
What can they actually do with this information?
It's easy to get bogged down in the numbers, but the good news is even small steps can make a big difference.
Okay.
One of the most effective strategies, and Bankrate emphasizes this, is automating your savings.
I love the idea of automating things.
Me too.
It takes the guesswork and the willpower out of the equation.
Exactly.
Instead of relying on yourself to remember to transfer money each month, you set it up once and it just happens.
Right. So
Yeah.
set up a system where even a small portion of each paycheck,
Okay.
like $10, $20, whatever you can manage,
Yeah.
is automatically transferred to a separate savings account.
Good.
You won't even miss it. But over time, those small amounts really add up.
That makes sense.
And speaking of resources, Bankrate actually offers a wealth of, helpful guides and tips on their website,
Oh, cool.
specifically designed to help people get started with saving.
Okay.
So if you're feeling lost or unsure where to begin, those guides can really break down the process into manageable steps.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel paralyzed by the enormity of it all,
Right.
You know, I need to save 6 months of expenses. How will I ever do that?
Exactly.
But if you can break it down into smaller, more achievable goals,
Right.
it feels a lot less daunting. It's like that saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
I love that.
Speaking of journeys,
Okay.
we've been talking about emergency savings, but we haven't really defined what an emergency actually is.
That's a really important point. People often have different ideas about what qualifies as a true emergency,
Yeah.
and that can lead to confusion and potentially depleting those savings for, non-essential expenses.
Right. So how do we clarify this for our listener?
Yeah.
What should they consider a true emergency?
Well, a good rule of thumb, I think, is to think of it as anything unexpected that threatens your immediate health safety
Right.
or ability to maintain your basic needs.
Okay, so give us some examples. What falls under that umbrella?
Things like a sudden medical expense,
Okay.
a major car repair that prevents you from getting to work, a job loss,
Mm-hmm.
a necessary home repair,
Okay.
even having to evacuate your home due to a natural disaster.
Wow.
These are all situations where having access to those emergency funds can be absolutely critical.
Mm.
It can make the difference between, weathering the storm and facing a cascade of financial hardships.
So to sum up, it's important to, define what an emergency means to it. You create a plan for building those savings, automate the process as much as possible, and don't be afraid to seek out those helpful resources like the guides on Bankrate's website.
Exactly.
Now, I want to zoom out a bit and kind of connect this back to the bigger picture.
Okay.
We've seen how individual Americans are grappling with these financial challenges,
Yeah.
but how do these trends reflect the overall state of the economy?
Right.
Are there any insights we can glean from this data?
That's a question economists and policymakers are constantly analyzing.
Yeah.
And the data from Bankrate's report does offer some valuable clues.
Okay.
For example, the fact that more Americans are saving this year could be a positive sign, indicating that inflation is cooling and people are feeling, slightly more financially secure.
That makes sense. If people feel like they can breathe a little easier, they're more likely to start thinking about saving for the future. But I'm sensing there's a but coming.
You're right. There's a big but.
Okay.
The persistently high levels of credit card debt and the fact that many still lack adequate emergency savings suggests that a significant portion of the population is still struggling.
So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah,
Some positive signs, but also some continued vulnerability.
absolutely.
It feels like we're in this in-between space, not quite out of the woods yet.
Exactly. And it's crucial to remember that economic trends can shift quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Factors like interest rate hikes, global events, even political decisions
Right.
can have a ripple effect on individual finances.
So what does this mean for our listener then?
Right.
What should they be paying attention to in the coming months and years?
I think the key is to stay informed, be proactive, and prioritize your financial well-being.
Okay.
Keep an eye on, economic news review, your budget regularly, and consider seeking advice from a financial advisor if needed.
So it's all about taking control where you can, right? You might not be able to predict the future of the economy, but you can equip yourself with the knowledge and tools to navigate whatever comes your way.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up completely, I want to shift gears a bit and bring in a topic we touched on earlier,
Okay.
the emotional side of money.
Oh, yeah.
We've explored the data, we've discussed, strategies, but what's often missing from these conversations is how money makes us feel.
Right.
It's not just about, logic and spreadsheets.
Right.
It's about our relationship with money.
Yeah.
And that can be a deeply personal and often emotional thing.
You're absolutely right. For some people, talking about money triggers feelings of stress, shame, or even fear.
Yeah.
Others might feel a sense of scarcity or lack, while some might feel, driven and ambitious when it comes to their finances.
Yeah.
It's a whole spectrum of emotions.
It really is.
What's important is understanding your own money mindset.
I think a lot of people avoid even thinking about their money mindset because it can be uncomfortable.
Oh, for sure.
But like you said, it's so important to be aware of those underlying beliefs and emotions.
Absolutely.
Once you can start to challenge them and reshape them in a more positive and empowering way.
Exactly. It's like shining a light on those hidden scripts that are running in the background
Yeah.
and influencing our financial decisions.
So how do we even begin to unpack those money beliefs?
Yeah.
Where do we start?
Well, a good starting point, I think, is to reflect on your own experiences and influences.
Okay.
How did your family talk about money when you were growing up? What messages did you absorb from, society or the media?
That's such a good point. We all inherit certain money scripts,
We do.
whether we realize it or not.
Yeah,
And sometimes those scripts can be holding us back without us even knowing it.
absolutely.
It's like those invisible barriers we create for ourselves.
Precisely. For example, if you grew up believing that money is scarce or that wealthy people are greedy,
Yeah.
you might subconsciously sabotage your own financial success. Or if you were taught that it's not polite to talk about money, you might avoid having those important conversations about finances with your partner or family.
It's like we're afraid to even talk about it, which just perpetuates the cycle.
Exactly.
But once you become aware of those patterns,
Right.
you can start to break free.
Exactly. The first step to breaking them down
Yeah.
is becoming aware of them.
I see.
Start paying attention to your thoughts and feelings when it comes to money.
Okay.
What triggers your anxiety?
Yeah.
What makes you feel confident?
Yeah.
Once you've identified those patterns, you can start the real work,
Okay.
challenging those limiting beliefs and replacing them with more empowering ones.
Okay, walk us through that.
Well-
Give our listeners some practical tips for how to do that.
Okay.
What are some strategies for shifting those negative money beliefs?
One powerful technique is affirmations.
Okay.
Start repeating positive statements about your financial abundance, even if you don't fully believe them at first.
Yeah.
For example, you might say, I am worthy of financial security. Or, I attract wealth and abundance into my life.
I love that.
Yeah,
It's like rewiring your brain for success.
exactly.
Instead of focusing on what you lack, you're intentionally shifting your focus to what you want to create.
Right.
What are some other strategies?
Surrounding yourself with positive financial influences can be incredibly helpful.
Okay.
Read books, listen to podcasts, or connect with people who have a healthy relationship with money.
Yeah.
Their energy and wisdom can really rub off on you.
And don't forget the power of visualization.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine yourself achieving your financial goals, feeling that sense of security and freedom.
Right.
The more you visualize it, the more real it becomes in your mind, which can really motivate you to take action.
Absolutely. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah,
There will be ups and downs.
right.
But the key is to keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in your ability to create a life of financial well-being.
So much great advice packed into this deep dive.
I hope so.
I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
Yeah.
We've explored the data on emergency savings,
Right.
discussed practical strategies for building that financial cushion, and even delved into the emotional side of money.
I think so.
Yeah, and I hope they feel inspired and empowered to take action.
Me too.
Even small steps can make a big difference over time.
For sure.
Remember, financial well-being is within your reach.
It is.
To our amazing deep divers out there, we challenge you to take what you've learned today and put it into practice.
Yes.
Start building that emergency fund,
Yeah.
explore those helpful resources on Bankrate's website, and most importantly, cultivate a positive and empowering relationship with money.
Absolutely.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Till next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep thriving.
You're absolutely right. For some people, talking about money can trigger some pretty intense feelings like stress or shame or even fear,
Oh, yeah, totally.
while other folks might feel a sense of scarcity or lack, and then others might feel super driven and ambitious when it comes to their finances.
It's such a mixed bag.
It's a whole spectrum of emotions.
Yeah.
I think what's really important is to try and understand, your own personal money mindset.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just avoid even thinking about it because it can be so uncomfortable.
Oh, it can be, for sure.
But like you said, it's so important to be aware of those kind of underlying beliefs and emotions that we have around money.
Absolutely.
Because once you are, you can actually start to challenge them and reshape them in a way that's more positive and empowering.
Exactly. It's like shining a light on those hidden scripts that are running in the background and influencing our financial decisions without us even realizing it.
Right. It's like we're on autopilot.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
how do we even begin to unpack those money beliefs? Like, where do we even start?
Well, a good starting point, I think, is to just kind of reflect on your own experiences and influences.
Okay.
Think about how your family talked about money when you were growing up.
Yeah.
What messages did you absorb from society or the media?
It's like we inherit these money scripts,
They do.
whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, and sometimes those scripts can be holding us back without us even knowing it.
It's like these invisible barriers that we create for ourselves.
Precisely. For example, if you grew up believing that money is scarce or that wealthy people are inherently greedy, you might be subconsciously sabotaging your own financial success.
Wow, it's crazy how that works.
Yeah. Or, if you are always taught that it's not polite to talk about money, you might avoid having important conversations about finances with your partner or family.
And it's like we're so afraid to even talk about it that we just perpetuate the cycle.
Exactly.
But once we become aware of those patterns,
Right.
then we can start to break free.
Exactly. The first step to breaking those scripts down is to just become aware of them.
So become aware, and then what?
Well, start paying attention to your thoughts and feelings when it comes to money.
Okay.
What triggers your anxiety? What makes you feel confident?
Mm.
Once you've identified those patterns, you can start the real work, challenging those limiting beliefs and replacing them with ones that are more empowering.
Okay, so walk us through that a little bit.
Sure.
Give our listeners some practical tips.
Okay.
What are some strategies for shifting those negative money beliefs?
One really powerful technique is affirmations.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
Yes, start repeating positive statements about your financial abundance, even if you don't fully believe them at first.
Okay,
For example, you could say something like, I am worthy of financial security,
I like that.
or I attract wealth and abundance into my life.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like you're rewiring your brain for success.
Exactly.
Instead of focusing on what you lack, you're intentionally shifting your focus to what you want to create.
Right.
What are some other strategies that people can use?
I think surrounding yourself with positive financial influences can be super helpful.
Okay, how do we do that?
You can read books, listen to podcasts, or connect with people who you admire who have a really healthy relationship with money. Okay, their energy and wisdom can really rub off on you.
That makes sense.
And don't forget about the power of visualization.
Oh, yeah. Visualization is huge.
It is, imagine yourself achieving your financial goals, feeling that sense of security and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
The more you can visualize it, the more real it becomes in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that can really motivate you to take action.
I agree with that.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There will be ups and downs along the way.
Oh, for sure.
But the key is to just keep learning, keep growing,
Mm.
and keep believing in your ability to create a life of financial well-being.
Such great advice, and so much packed into this deep dive. I feel like we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
I hope so.
We've explored all this data on emergency savings, discussed practical strategies for building that financial cushion, and even kind of delved into, the emotional side of money.
It's been a great conversation.
It has, and I hope our listeners are feeling inspired and empowered to take action.
Me too.
Even small steps can make such a huge difference over time.
Absolutely.
Remember, financial well-being is within your reach.
It is.
To our amazing deep divers out there, we challenge you to take what you've learned today and put it into practice.
Yes.
Start building that emergency fund,
Mm-hmm.
explore those helpful resources that we talked about on Bankrate's website,
Mm-hmm.
and most importantly, cultivate a positive and empowering relationship with money.
I love that.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep thriving.